Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Counselor's Couch 101. I'm Jim Stump, and first I'd like to give a shout out and a thanks to the folks who are agreed to be readers on a project that I'm working on. I appreciate it greatly. If you have any questions about that, put them in the comments below or in an email. That's counselorscouch101 at mail.com, just mail.com. And we'll fill you in on that if you have any interest in it. But thank you for the readers. I appreciate you taking on the project. Um, Last week in a comment, someone mentioned the idea of projection. They say that people project things onto other people and like that. And I thought that was an interesting comment and an interesting observation. I imagine most of you know what projection is, at least when we think in terms of counseling. But in case someone doesn't, I'll try to explain it briefly. In the old days before current technology, if you went to a movie theater, they would have a machine up in the back of the theater that would cast light, and it would go through the film. The film would be going by, and the light would shine through it, and it would push an image out, and it would image could be seen on a screen, right? The instrument doing the light was called a projector because of projecting light out onto the screen. And when we think in terms of, we could see what was on the film. Now the film is all recorded, right? You couldn't do anything to the film, you couldn't alter it, but you could see what was on it, right? The screen itself, they called it the silver screen, or it was a white screen. They were blank. There was nothing there at all except what was projected on it. And that's the idea behind projection when we think of counseling, right? And think of it this way. Someone comes up and they start talking to you, and you put your ideas of what they're saying onto them. You project out your interpretation of what you're hearing onto them. Now, the thing about projection is it's always wrong, always, right? If you're listening to someone and you have a good communication and you do understand what they're saying, that is not projection, that is communication. That means that you are getting a clear picture of what the person is trying to present to you. But if they're talking and you got a completely different idea in your head than what they are thinking in their head, that is projection, right? And oftentimes what we project are negatives. Not only are they never correct, but they're usually negatives. We're listening to the person, we're looking at them. Maybe we have some sort of an idea of who this person is because they remind us of someone, or what they're saying sounds like an experience that you went through, or the sound of their voice reminds you of someone, or the way they're moving, their mannerisms. And we're projecting those memories in our memory banks onto that person. And we're assuming, if we're projecting, we're assuming that what they're doing is what we're thinking, which may be and usually is completely wrong. So we're misinterpreting the signals that we're getting. That's projection. When it comes to relationships, if people start telling you what you're doing and telling you and explaining to you how it's wrong and etc., they could possibly be projecting. Let me put it that way. They could be projecting the things from their memory banks and like that. And if they're doing that and you want to clarify the communication, you would question it. If you don't want to clarify the communication, you let the person go on in their ignorance, shall we call it, their misunderstanding of what's taking place. And if we are projected on enough, oftentimes we just stop trying to communicate with that person. We say, hey, have a great day, go in peace. We don't seem to communicate very well. There's another aspect to this projection thing that counselors have used as a technique. And once upon a time, they called it a blank screen, right? And the idea was that the counselor was supposed to present as little information about themselves as possible. In order to allow the person, the client who's talking, trying to work on a problem, to project onto that blank screen, the counselor, the issues that are bothering them. Now, in that technique, a client would accuse the counselor of all sorts of things that were not true. But those things that the client identified let the counselor know what was going on in that person's thinking, right? So that's the idea behind that. Projection can work in a beneficial way if it's used that way. That blank screen, I don't think it's as popular anymore, but it was at a time where a counselor would try to be as quiet as possible, give no personal information whatsoever. Even the way that someone would dress would communicate something to the client, who could then do something with it in a way of projecting their own thoughts or feelings about what they're seeing onto the counselor, who could then interpret it. Most often you see that idea of blank screen in psychoanalysis. I like old movies. If you ever saw old movies in which there was a psychiatrist, and he would be in a room with a couch, and a person would come in 4 and 5 times a week and lie on the couch and start talking. Well, the analyst, the psychiatrist, wouldn't say anything. Usually they'd sit off behind the person, so to speak, off to the side and behind, and just take notes as to what the person was saying. And afterwards they would analyze. That's why they're called analysts. They would analyze what the person had said and try to identify the issues that were at hand. And every once in a while they might ask that particular client about certain things that came up, and ask the client to expand on those ideas more, thus revealing more and more and more of what was in their memory banks and their psyche. There are lots of different names for it, and we can go at it a whole lot of different ways, but that's the basic idea. We're trying to, in that type of counseling, we're trying to bring up all those things in the memory banks in order to examine them and see if they are still accurate for today's time, for here and now. Because oftentimes people are running into trouble because they are projecting those negative thoughts out into the world. And when you project, it doesn't only have to be on a person. It can be on a city. It could be on a situation. It could be on traffic. It could be on freeways. It could be on anything. We're just projecting. We're thinking people are cutting us off on the highway when all they're trying to do is to get home because they're tired too, right? But we're thinking they were trying to be mean to us. That's a kind of projection. We start to analyze what we're doing, and and as we come to an understanding of it, we stop doing it and things get better. Life improves, right? We stop assigning motivation to people that's not there. We start to listen more carefully and to understand each other more deeply, and then things get better. People like to feel understood, and they like to feel like someone's listening to them and gets them. But if they're talking and we keep projecting back our thoughts and feelings that are not accurate to what the other person is feeling, they're going to feel like there's no communication there at all. So projection, that's what goes on most of the time in the world. We bring all our experiences, our thoughts, everything that ever happened to us. Like I said, I love movies. I watch old movies all the time. We bring all those situations from all those old movies and we apply them in the moment because they are in our memory banks. I've said it before, but it's like that DOS system. Thinking of computers. Computers are designed after the human mind. The operating system at the bottom of the computer, everything that goes through that computer goes through that operating system, and then it comes up and it goes into all the programs in the system, all of them, and the ones that are supposed to work connect up with the information and do something to it and give you a result, right? That's how that works. And that's the same thing with the human being and the human thinking, the human understanding. It goes through all our memories, all our hurts, all our good times, all our thoughts, all of our experiences, and it comes up with some sort of an answer or a response or an understanding, right? Now, have you ever heard the expression garbage in, garbage out? That was an early computer type of a concept. In other words, the computer can only work with the information that is stored in the computer, right? The same way with the human mind. Now, if the information in the computer is incorrect, erroneous, or flat out wrong, you're going to get a wrong answer. Garbage in, garbage out. If you put wrong questions and wrong sorts of demands in, you're not going to get a satisfactory result. Same thing with the mind, same thing with the psyche, and with the understanding of communication in the world around us. If we're putting in bad information or if we're running our information through bad memories and experiences and hurts and pains in the body, we're going to get a result that is not as accurate as we might like if we're trying to be a better person in the world. By better, I mean a better functioning person, right? Someone who gets along and accomplishes projects. So that's the deal of it. And when one of the things I suggest to folks is that they pay attention to their own thoughts, right? I say, oftentimes I ask clients, what are you thinking right now? Because they're reacting to our conversation and they're coming up with some sort of a thought process. The mind never stops talking to itself, never. What are you thinking? And they say, I think this counselor's a jerk, right? If they say, if their brain is telling them something like that, they're going to have a sort of reaction in that way toward that counselor and that conversation, right? So I check in with people and I tell them that's what I suggest you do as you go through your week. You don't have to pay attention to every single thought, but here and there, if you're feeling a negative way, if you're feeling low or depressed, or if you're angry about something, stop for a second and think, what is your brain saying to you? The brain never stops talking. What is it saying right now? And chances are people will locate the negative thoughts and thought patterns that they have during the week. When they start to recognize that, if it's not giving them results they want, we talk about that and suggest that they release that stuff or at least challenge it, right? If you're having a negative thought and it's not true, we challenge it, we get rid of it, we put in the correct information and then look at the situation again. So the idea of projection, we're projecting in our heads all the time. What are we thinking? What is it saying? Is it positive? Is it negative? Are we completely understanding the reality in front of us, or are we projecting our thoughts on it? Projection, of course, can be positive or good, as well as bad or negative. Sometimes we'll project on someone all sorts of positive attributes. We think they're a certain kind of a person. We get involved in a particular relationship only to find out 5 years or 10 years later that we were completely wrong. The only thing that was going on in that relationship was what we were thinking about that relationship. So it's a good idea to get rid of projection in our brains. Get rid of it in the sense of be aware that we're doing it and not let us lead us into erroneous conclusions, right? We pay attention to our thoughts. Challenge the thought. Is it correct? Is it accurate? If someone's talking to me and I have an impression about it, and I'm not sure if what I'm thinking is what they're saying, I will clarify. I will say something like, do you mean this or do you mean that? They'll say, no, I don't mean those things at all. I mean something entirely different. And as we clarify, communication gets better and we have better results, and we probably dial down our anxiety, our stress, and our depression when we start to see things as they really are, not as how we're projecting them to be. Anyway, so that came up from a comment that I received last week. I thought it might be an interesting idea to present to you folks right here. The idea of projection. What are we thinking? Is it accurate? Just something to think about. You can improve your outlook on life. You can improve your relationships by paying attention to it. And when it's wrong, recognize that it's wrong and correct it. Just some thoughts. Thanks for stopping by. I look forward to talking with you next time. Have a blessed day.